Ricky and Dave are two tabletop gamers who love their hobby. At 2015 PAX convention, Mike Selinker, a favourite game designer of theirs, released his list of 100 games you absolutely, positively must know how to play. The 100th game was a challenge. The 100th game was one that you designed yourself. Knowing nothing about game design, Ricky and Dave have set out to play through as many games from Mike's list as possible, hoping to learn enough to design their game. Join them now as they look for the CoreMechanic.
Hi everybody, I'm Ricky.
And I'm Dave.
And welcome to the CoreMechanic.
Today we're reviewing Mike Selinker's Pathfinder the Adventure card game, which is number 65 on Mike's list. Pathfinder the Adventure card game is a 1 to 4 player co-op game designed by Mike Selinker, published by Paizo, and was released at the 2013 Gen Con, 4 years after the initial release of the RPG with the same name. Pathfinder the Adventure card game is a fantasy-based card game that Mike Selinker had on his list as a deck builder, even though it was intended to be an RPG without a DM.
The rules for the game are actually incredibly simple. Every card has a check, and all you need to do is roll dice to match or beat that check. A player's turns are divided into phases. The very first thing a player can do is exchange cards with another player at their location. Then they have the option to move. Afterwards, they get a free explore of their location. That's where they'll do the first rolling to determine whether they beat or acquire the card revealed. For each adventure, there are a number of location decks. Each location deck is combined of different boons and banes, which make up that deck. It is the player's job to go through that deck, using their free explorations and any bonus explorations they can each turn. While it might sound simple, chasing each player's actions is the 30-turn countdown deck. At the beginning of each player's turn, one card is revealed, lowering the deck. If that countdown deck reaches 0 before the players find and defeat the villain, then the players lose the scenario and have to try again. This does not mean that the players' characters die, however. Each player has their own unique character with their own unique skills. As a reward for beating certain scenarios, a character might gain a new power, might become better at their current skills, or evolve into an entirely new class of character completely. The core box set comes with the first adventure and a tutorial, which players can play to get used to the flow of the game. Subsequent adventures have to be purchased, but with each box comes new cards, new boons, and harder villains for you to match up against. So when it comes to designing characters, each player gets their choice of their own preset character, depending on whichever class they'd like to play.
It was exciting for me because I got to choose to be the Necromancer, which is something I've never done before. Huzzah!
Yeah. Lucky you, I've decided to go with a monk.
Yeah, nice. I get to summon the dead, you get to wish them well as they die. It's brilliant. In terms of the adventure card game, I have to say that the character development is very much already mapped out for you. That's
right. You know exactly where you're going to go in the future. You've got all your +1 tick boxes and whatnot, which gives you this ability to really plan out where you want to go.
That's true. And I suppose to some extent I almost miss that ability to balance my character the way I want. But considering that I was always rubbish at doing that, it's probably for the best.
I think it's really good for developing the flavour of your character as well, you know?
Yeah, and it cuts through all of that, let's have a 2-hour session of sitting down and just filling in numbers and rolling dice.
Going through the player handbook, determining which feats you want to take. It's all there on the cards for you.
Yeah. In fact, that's probably one of the good qualities of this game, is that it really is, it's a nice ease into that whole role-playing genre.
Yeah, but that's not to say that the game doesn't have an element of depth to it. As I said before, you can choose a path for your character to go on, and the way you'll play, the type of enemies you'll face and the type of boons you'll want to face, that's going to change dramatically as well. And
I like, one of the things that we've talked about before that you've mentioned is that you actually said that if you have the right group of people, and I know all games are kind of dependent on having the right group of people, but if you have the right group of people, you can get into a bit of a storytelling mode.
That's right.
I know for our group we have a house rule that before you kill the final character, you must have some bad B-grade movie finishing line.
Which makes it a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. It's always good because we always stop and we all sit around and brainstorm the best line to come up with to kill the person. I think it's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you can sort of, it does have good flavour on the text. it's definitely not. It's not what you would do if you were a hardcore role player.
No, absolutely not. Though having said that, there's quite a choice of character classes. If you want a fighter, you've got that. If you want a cleric, you've got that. If you want a druid, a barbarian, a gunslinger. True,
and in fact, one of the things that you mentioned as someone who's not, you've not done role-playing games before, have you?
Yeah.
My introduction to role-playing games was Vampire the Masquerade, which is one of the games we'll be reviewing in this series.
Looking forward to it.
But for someone who hasn't done role-playing games before, you mentioned that it was really good for developing that language for you.
My introduction to role-playing actually came through video games like Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights 2, which tried to incorporate the same sort of explanation and mechanics. So when I came over to this, I was already familiar with the idea of skills being, based on certain dice rolls.
Yeah, and listening to you now, like doing checks and doing dice rolls and doing all this sort of thing, the way you talk about it as if you're someone who's experienced in role-playing games.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to doing a full-blown one to see how it all pans out. If there's one thing I feel this game is missing, it's that sort of depth that comes from character decisions.
That's true. You've got your key locations, and you go and you can do it very mechanically if you want to play the game that way. You can just go in, roll your dice, get the card, do all the maths.
Yep.
But I think that's probably not taking it in the spirit it was made. Whether that's the game design's fault or not, that you can do it that way, I'm not sure.
Yeah, the thing about the game is there is a storyline.
Yeah, there certainly is.
Yep. The choices of locations, they're not random. There's a reason why you've got the castle gates, the apothecary, and the general town, because you're sort of getting the scenario of a town that's been invaded and you're there to go and help them. But once again, like you said, in terms of going mechanically, it's very easy to lose sight of that. The story will come out depending on, once again, the group of people that you're with. If you're heavily with role players, I'm sure you'll glean a lot more story. But maybe that's a point in the game's favour. For those people that just want to get straight to the dice rolling action,
they could do that.
Every single turn.
And it is action the whole way through.
That's right.
There's none of this where we can get caught up in role-playing games. Because I suppose one of the downsides of role-playing games is you can get caught up in just trying to stuff up the GM. And I've heard stories of GMs who just suck the player's time because they just refuse to go along with the storyline. And that just can't happen here.
No.
So to some extent it keeps you motivated, keeps you focused, it keeps you on task.
And playing.
And playing the whole time. So you are engaged the whole time.
Yep. And every time you flip a card over, it's either a heart attack waiting to happen or it's one of the happiest days of your life.
Well, that's true.
If I could liken it to anything, I'd liken it to hitting a piñata with some cockroaches in it.
That's a strangely disturbing and graphic image you've got there. I would say, look, for me, one of the downsides was the downtime.
Yes.
Even in an RPG, when someone else's turn, I'm either engrossed in the storytelling that's going on, or I'm contributing something still. I'm talking it through with them. We're thinking out loud together. Not so much here.
That's right.
I mean, usually going into the adventure, there's a bit more meta talk. We talk about, well, which character will do best which where. But once we're into it. And that's game on.
And as far as cooperation goes, I don't know. To me, the game feels a little bit limited in that sense. Sure, if your characters are in the same location, characters like the fighter Valeros, he can add an extra D4 to someone else who happens to run into a monster in the same location as him. If he's not in the same location, I don't know. Valeros can't really do much except maybe throw a blessing his way.
In terms of it being a co-op, though, it really does fit that model the way it's meant to, though. I mean, you can play it as a one player, which is like any of the co-op games that I have that are genuinely co-op. I can play as one player, because essentially co-op games are puzzle games.
That's right.
They're just you trying to work out a puzzle, and each time the puzzle might be a little bit different through the randomness of the cards or which characters you choose, but essentially each time it's still a puzzle. And I think to that extent, it does contain, it is a co-op of that magnitude, but whether it has the same complexity that keeps every person engaged all at the same time is a different matter.
We'll have to see as we get further on into the adventures.
Well, that's right. But I look forward to it, and especially the thing I like about not only having those adventure packs that we built onto the story. So you get the base game and the adventure packs. But we've recently also picked up character packs, which could just be squeezing me for money. I don't know. But at the same time, for some reason, I am oddly excited about having a pack of cards there that is geared specifically towards my character.
Yeah, I love the class decks. I think they're meant for higher level play. I know that Paizo does run its own specific competition for Pathfinder, where you can take one of the characters from the character decks, and I think you meet up with other players at a set location. That way you can take that one character that you've built from game to game to game to game.
Right.
But having said that, yep, you've got special cards that you're just not going to get in the core deck or in any of the adventure stuff, which just adds a little bit more flavour to the character you're playing.
And personalises it a little bit more as well, which I think is good. And the artwork, I just can't. My Necromancer is the most beautiful thing I've seen. He's gorgeous.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
That's true. Mike has it on the list as a deck builder.
Yep.
Do you think it best fits the deck builder mold, or should it be an RPG? Should it be something new entirely?
Well, I don't think it really fits into
I'm asking you because I can't answer that question myself.
That's right. Well, I don't know. I think that mechanically speaking, yes, you could call it a deck builder because you are building a deck that gradually gets better and better and better. But in terms of flavour, I don't know. For me, a deck builder is played in a single session where you just try and get the best cards for that one session. After the game's finished, everything resets, and next time you play, you start from zero again. This definitely has more of that RPG progressive feel. Yeah, I think it does. I can see the deck building side of it. It definitely has almost that legacy feel to it that those games try to embody of that each game is different and each game grows and the choices you make have an impact on the next game. So I think I like that idea. I don't want to put it into the deck builder list myself personally because I think it should grow beyond that sort of classification. But as we've noted, it lacks the complexity of some of the tabletop RPGs, so I don't know. Can you call it an RPG? You certainly have role-playing elements.
True.
Maybe it does deserve its own category.
Perhaps. Now, Mike said that he was happy putting it on the list for now and that it may be surpassed at some time. But why do you think... I guess the question is, why do we think that it was on the list?
Mike noted that himself, didn't he?
Yeah.
Everything on the list, he stated that there's nothing quite like it. And I think he's right.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I've never played anything with this much consistency across a time frame, you know. I've never built a character in a board game before, or a...
That's a good point. Yeah. Building a character in a board game is probably a good way of putting it too.
Yeah.
And usually I think it sort of extends our idea of board game beyond what you were saying before, that just single play session thing. Yeah. So I think being a part of that story, even if it's not the same depth of an RPG, but I don't need the rule book of an RPG either.
That's right.
One of the things that this game does really well is I can just jump in. It took me all of about maybe 10 minutes to learn the rules.
Yep.
But as soon as we did the first round, I was comfortable with the rules, and then I was building strategy, and I was trying to work things out, and I was getting immersed in the game.
Yep.
So that learning curve was really quick. It was really easy. But at the same time, that didn't mean that I understood the fullness of the game yet.
Yeah.
I still had learning to go, but I was comfortable and I could get in and I could start getting to the meaty stuff.
That's
pretty
right.
much straight away.
And sometimes I think of this game, maybe it's meant to be that sort of gateway, a vector from traditional one-stage board games to deeper RPGs. As we've mentioned before, there is story here, but the mechanics very clear once you've had a few goes of it and you know basically what the turn is. Yeah, very easy to pick up.
Yeah. So I guess the big question is for us, well, what mechanics can we take away from this when considering building our own game? In terms of building your own game, have you ever thought of making a deck builder?
I have thought of it, but the idea of having to create all those cards and all the rules and whatnot turns me off a bit. But if there is one thing I really love about this, it's the way it's translated, that sense of story, of theatre, into what are essentially mechanical dice rules.
Yeah, and in fact I would say that one of the hardest things to do is to really get people sucked into a game and take them on that journey. But for me, it's all those things that you've said prior in our conversations and in our review. It's the consistency of language. It's having the simplicity of rules that people can pick up and go with. If I was going to design a game, I would want to be really clear about what each bit of language meant. And I want to keep that as consistent as possible. Deck building, I think, is one of the first ideas I had for gaming.
Really?
Well, I think it came naturally to me because I've played Yu-Gi-Oh for how long?
Magic,
so so getting into things like Star Realms and that was really simple for me, and I enjoy deck building. One of the things I loved about Yu-Gi-Oh was I always hated the meta. The fact that people would just net deck and would drive me insane. The most success I had at tournaments, the most success I had at nationals, the most fun I had was when I stepped away from the meta and actually started adding in my own flavour and my own tastes of things.
And I suppose that's one of the key things to come away from this as a card game. You look at every card and it's got all the information you need there to start formulating strategy. And you start thinking about things like, how can this card fit in my deck? How's it going to help my character? How's it going to help someone else's character? That entire strategic planning that comes all on one little card. I think one of the most clever things was the implementation of RPG mechanic into card building. And by that I mean, prime example, your deck. 15 cards. That 15 cards is not just your resources, it actually represents your life.
That was clever.
That's right. So every action that you can do with the card, so discarding, recharging, burying, displaying, every time you use up a resource, it's not just, you playing a card into a discard pile. It's you sacrificing a part of yourself, bringing yourself that much closer to death. And death in this game is final.
That's Pathfinder, the adventure card game. Join with us next time as we review the next game from Mike Selinker's list. Until then, insert random catchphrase. Do you have a catchphrase? How are we going to end our show? With
CoreMechanic, breaking the core.
Breaking the core. Son of the core. Excelsior! No, that's taken.
No,
can't use that. That's probably copyright. Probably already breached copyright on that one. Each of Edge.
Viva la Ludo.
Viva what?
Didn't you say the Latin thing for
Carpe diem
was...
ludology.
Ludology,
I think that's taken as well. Too bad.
Anyway.
All right.
Have your say in the comments below. This episode's question is, what game should replace Pathfinder?